But this story is incredible for so many people. I think in particular, of course, today of the survivors.
Yes.
I know you've spoken to many of them
yes.
and followed their individual cases and stories closely. What do you imagine they are thinking today, or what do you know they are thinking today if you've been able to reach them?
Well, I've reached out to an organization called World Without Exploitation that has done a bunch of advocacy on behalf of and in concert with many of these survivors. For example, Antonio, they were involved in survivors coming to Pam Bondi's testimony last week before the House Judiciary Committee. I think they see today as a relief and a step toward accountability in the sense that Prince Andrew is being investigated and could face charges in connection with misconduct having to do with Jeffrey Epstein. But of course, it's not the misconduct that most concerns them, which is the question of who else will be held accountable for the sexual abuse that was perpetrated as against them. When you talk to survivors, two sort of pictures emerge. First of all, there were a constellation of people in and around Jeffrey Epstein that facilitated this abuse, that made it logistically possible for him to accomplish this. And I think they're interested in understanding why some of those people haven't been investigated and or if they will be investigated. But more broadly, some of them will tell folks now that there are other people that participated in this abuse, that they were trafficked to. Prior to the release of the Epstein files, really the only survivor from whom we heard those stories in a detailed fashion was Virginia Giuffre, who is now, of course, deceased. But what I expect may happen in the coming weeks and months, particularly as Congress continues its own investigation in the absence of steps toward accountability by the Department of Justice, is you may see a public outcry for further criminal accountability for people who participated in that abuse. And you may start to see names being named that haven't been part of the criminal investigations so far, because survivors are frankly less afraid than they were at a time where Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were roaming free and able to intimidate them or worse during that freedom.
I want to bring in two additional guests. We're going to bring in Sky News correspondent Shimon Freeman Powell outside Prince Andrew's Sandringham estate, and British historian and author Andrew Lowney. He wrote entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York, about the former prince. Shimon, I'll start with you. What are you hearing from people as they process this monumental news today?
Well, it's been an extraordinary day, especially here at Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate. As you can see, it's nighttime now, but there is still lots of activity. There's still a police presence here, and there has been members of the public walking through this area, stopping to take photos, because now it is a very significant location on what is also a historic day. It was, of course, here at around 8 a.m. Local time that we heard reports that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor had been arrested. It was shortly after that, around 2 hours later, that we got a statement from Thames Valley Police confirming that a man in his 60s had been arrested. Now, we understand that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is likely still in police custody. Here in the UK, the police have around 24 hours to hold a suspect without charges. It can be extended, but that would need to be authorised by a senior officer. But this arrest also allows for police to be able to search this property, not just this property at Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, but the property at Royal Lodge too. And of course, the police will be going through those properties with a fine-tooth comb. They'll be looking for any paperwork, any diaries, any documentation that can support its investigation. It will also be looking for digital communications like emails and messages to see whether or not that will help with its investigation too. Of course, with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor being arrested for misconduct in public office linked to the release of those Epstein files and millions of documents that are being dumped online. And this arrest comes as the police had previously said that it was reviewing allegations that Andrew may have shared share sensitive information with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the former prince, had denied all of the allegations against him previously, but these allegations are thought to be linked to his role as a working royal, specifically linked to his role as the UK trade envoy. So as I say, nighttime has fallen here, but there is still lots of police activity here on the Sandringham estate. It's actually well known here and famous as being the place that the royals like to reside over Christmas, but today it's now famous for being the place that the former prince was arrested.
Shimon Freeman Powell, thank you so much for laying. So, Andrew, that is clearly very much in contrast to what Virginia Giuffre wrote about Andrew in her book, Nobody's Daughter. I want to read just a quick quote from that. I said in a sworn declaration in 2015, Epstein, Andy, and approximately 8 other young girls and I had sex together. The other girls all seemed and appeared to be under the age of 18 and didn't really speak English. Epstein laughed about how they couldn't really communicate, saying they are the easiest girls to get along with. Andrew, when you take her account and you look back at former Prince Andrew's own words from 2019, how do you make sense of how things have changed over these last few years?
Well, I mean, my book, which came out last August, I took 5 years to research. I interviewed 300 people. So none of this is a surprise to me. It's actually all there in the book. I mean, I think the tipping point has come with some of the release of these Epstein emails, really showing with chapter and verse of how he was passing on confidential information. But, this stuff has been, as I say, in my book, because the case here is misconduct in public service. It's not actually to do with sex trafficking at this stage. I think those charges may be levelled, much more difficult to get the witnesses to come forward. And I'd say, just following from your previous correspondent, I mean, Andrew has been destroying all this evidence since the beginning of December, so I don't think the police are going to find much at Sandringham. And I think that's possibly one of the reasons why they've actually moved so swiftly to arrest him and to begin to question him.
Can I ask you what you make of the way in which the public here is responding? Many Americans this morning woke up and wondered, well, how can this happen to a member of the royal family, a former prince, but there seem to be so few consequences on the way for people who are still very influential in politics and business life here across the pond. Do you have a view of that? I guess across the Atlantic, how do people view what's unfolding here in the U.S. as this scandal continues to roil, but so few people seem to be held accountable for what clearly transpired?
Well, there's plenty of evidence against the former Prince Andrew in terms of misconduct in public office, and so that's what they've acted on. There's also evidence against the former British ambassador in Washington, Peter Mandelson, and I think we'll see charges pressed against him soon. I can't speak for why charges haven't been, people haven't been investigated in the States. But certainly the British legal authorities are looking at all these names that come up, and there's a couple of other names that have come up in terms of sex trafficking, and I suspect we'll see questioning there. But you're absolutely right. Andrew was enabled by a whole host of people, including his staff, officials in the Foreign Office and the Civil Service, and questions clearly need to be asked about them, and I suspect they will be drawn into the questioning as the investigation expands.